This episode features one of the worst cases of dog abuse I've ever seen. Abuse so bad it's left dangerous behaviours, setting the dog up for euthanasia, but we are on a mission to ensure that that does not happen. These cases absolutely break my heart, and we have one of the worst cases of physical, emotional and mental abuse that I've seen dished out to a dog before, and it's definitely a case that I want to put my heart and soul into being able to work with to be able to save this dog's life. So the circumstances and situation that this dog was found in the way that it had been tied up and left for dead, and the physical state that Shadow was in when he was found simply is unacceptable, unforgivable, but it is the starting point and the point that we have to move forward with. Now, we believe that Shadow has been bought as a puppy, has been on a chain ever since until the day that he was then taken from that chain, tied up to the fence and left for dead. This has created an incredible level of reactivity. There is a bite history with Shadow, nothing overly serious, but whenever there is a bite history, it definitely then becomes more of a rush to be able to really help these dogs, because a large, powerful breed like a German Shepherd with a bite history is just simply a recipe for euthanasia. So job number one for me was being able to get him out the kennel whilst keeping himself, everybody else and myself safe. Now, I want to work with these dogs, I want to save these dogs' life, but I'm definitely not a fan of getting bitten, so that had to be the number one priority, was how we were going to be able to get him out of the kennel, that he has had to be in that kennel and confined to for quite a long time, that he has definitely become very guarding of, to be able to get him to accept me going in, getting him out the kennel, getting him into the training field where we can then really start to build relationship, leadership, trust, which will open up those communication pathways for us to be able to do some real significant positive change with him. Now, one of the options was to simply use a shield and a catch pole to be able to go in and not really give him too much choice on the matter. Now, I like to use that as an absolute last resort and explore all other avenues as possible, because I just feel like it just gets me off to such a bad foot with the dog when what we're trying to achieve is leadership through trust, relationship and then communication with the dog. So like I say, that for me is an absolute last resort. It's definitely something that often needs to be done in especially aggressive, dangerous situations, but if we can avoid it, we were definitely going to try. So I simply go and approach Shadow's kennel. Instantly the reactivity sparks up, and you can hear from the hoarseness of his bark how much barking he's been doing and how much damage he's been doing to his vocal cords. Now again, that is clearly a recipe from the abuse that he suffered and being chained up and just left to do that non-stop with no boundaries, discipline, relationship, trust or love in his life the second he went to that awful home. And this is where it gets interesting. As a dog lover, as someone who has dedicated myself to save these dogs' life, I have incredible amounts of empathy for these dogs, and it is all I want to do is to be able to help these dogs. And as much as what I want to do is smother them with love and care for them and tell them everything's going to be okay, in the world of canine behaviour and communication, that is actually completely counterproductive to achieving any levels of success. What Shadow absolutely needs in his life is a calm, consistent leader whom he can trust to then finally be able to open up some type of communication so that we can teach him how to behave in this world, how to get on safely. Now, to do that, we weren't going to pander to him. I absolutely had to face the problem head on and let him know that those kind of behaviours aren't going to be acceptable. Now, the problem with that kind of reactivity at a kennel is it becomes a very self-rewarding behaviour. Person comes up to kennel, Shadow barks, 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 person goes away from kennel, barking did the job. Now we need to let him know that that simply isn't going to work with me. Now, because of the way that Shadow was raised, there is zero communication already established with him, and there is absolutely no obedience commands. So that means that I can't go in and utilise any kind of obedience or a sit or a stay or a down or a wait to be able to allow me to get in and be able to work with him. It is completely foreign to him, so I have to communicate with him in a method that he's going to understand. Now, to do that, I used a very simple method of body language communication. I stood up tall, strong, chest back, shoulders back, in a position of leadership without trying to intimidate him or scare him. I stayed calm, consistent, and I displayed leadership. When that barking reactivity behaviour happened, which was always going to happen, I made it very clear that it is simply not going to achieve him his desired outcome of me leaving. So through non-verbal communication, using nothing more than body language and eye contact, I was able to make it very clear that that is not a behaviour that is acceptable and a behaviour that is going to work. And then it took a little while, but I got that golden moment, that moment I was hoping for, where he gave in to that and he said, okay, no worries, I understand. And the reactivity level came down. That was the moment that I needed. That was the moment that was gold through this consultation. It seems like a little thing, but that was the opening of the door of the ability to be able to save this dog's life. So then, displaying the correct behaviour that I want to see from him, which is calm, quiet behaviour, I was then able to use food rewards to let him know that I appreciate that. That's what I want from him in this situation. Then slowly but surely, I started to feed him through the gate. I gave him opportunities to grumble and growl, but because I'd gone through that process with him of accepting my authority and leadership in this situation, it made this process go much, much smoother. I was then able to simply slip a slip lead over his head and get him into the training field, which is now where the real work can begin. Now, in these first consultation sessions, I'm not necessarily looking to do any kind of behaviour modification program unless it's a death row situation where it's this behaviour needs to be addressed now or this dog is going to get put down. That's not the position that we're in with Shadow. We've got a little bit of time. So all I wanted to know in this consultation is more about his temperament, his character, his triggers, what kind of work we're gonna need to be implementing to move forward and to make progress. To do that, we tested some basic things, simply observation of how he reacts. What I wanted to see was there's any kind of level of looking up to a human for guidance and direction, of which there was 0. So that is gonna be the first hurdle that we're going to need to overcome, is building that leadership. With leadership then leads to relationship. With relationship, we'll have a dog that will look up to me for guidance and direction. When we get that, those communication pathways become wide open, and then we can start training. I then have to see what motivates and what drives this dog. Now, I tried some kind of physical touch and praise, but it was definitely a trigger for Shadow. Definitely stems from being abused, that he doesn't like people going anywhere near his head or around his neck, so I have to be very careful with how I physically interact with him. Surprisingly, we didn't get too much toy drive, but I do think that we can build on that as that relationship and trust starts to grow. So then we moved on to what kind of food drive does Shadow have. Now, we managed to get a good 60 to 90 seconds worth of back and forward, utilising food rewards, where I was able to engage him, get his attention and get him working with me for a treat. Now again, to a lot of people that may be used to working with well-behaved, well-socialised, well-trained dogs, utilising a food-based model, that might seem very trivial and not very much progress. But to us, with a dog that has suffered such high levels of abuse and has never had any kind of relationship or working bond with a handler, to be able to engage him for just 60 seconds was incredible progress. We'd gone from a dog that was extremely reactive, has a bite history, to be able to accept me into the kennel that it was guarding, to accept me to get a lead onto him, to be able to then get him out and do a little bit of work with him. This is huge progress and incredibly exciting, and gives me a lot of hope that we really are going to be able to make progress with Shadow, this German Shepherd, moving forward over the next sessions in the coming weeks. So an incredibly exciting case, one that was an absolute pleasure to work on, one that came with some severe levels of reactivity, aggression and a bite history, but one that in such a short space of time shows so much promise. And I can't wait to take you on that journey, going from one of the worst cases of abuse I've ever seen to hopefully finding this dog a loving forever home.